Hey everyone, and welcome back to the GetwellbeBe podcast. This podcast is designed to arm you with the knowledge and awareness you need to get and stay well your whole life. May is Lyme Disease Awareness Month, so I'm sharing my story of beating chronic Lyme disease from many years ago, which was really my first introduction to the holistic health and natural medicine world, and my first experience with chronic disease. Before we get started, remember you can read the written version of this episode with tons of research links over at getwellbe.com, where you'll also find information about the WellBe non-toxic product database and our other online programs, including a roadmap to healing, a program designed for people trying to kick chronic health issues like Lyme disease. Okay, now let's jump in. My story of Lyme recovery is like many Lyme stories, full of natural treatment options, conventional antibiotic therapy, and many ups and downs. But I hope for many of those people out there suffering and looking for answers, that sharing my story might provide some inspiration to keep going on your healing journey. At the very least, it should certainly paint a realistic picture of chronic Lyme symptoms and provide some ideas about natural remedies for Lyme disease remission and healing. First, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease at age 11, but only because of my younger brother's diagnosis before me. He'd been sick with what were pretty clear chronic Lyme symptoms, joint pain in his knees, and learning disabilities or cognitive issues, for years before any doctors figured out what was going on. When he was finally diagnosed, my parents looked at me, who had suffered from severe fatigue and short-term memory loss for at least a year, so since age 10, but before that, I didn't have those symptoms, and they wondered if I might have Lyme as well. Sure enough, I did. Lyme disease testing is historically very inaccurate. In fact, only 50% of tests are actually accurate. That's like flipping a coin. The accuracy varies widely based on when you were bitten, when you were tested, and the type of test used. The lab quality of where you send the tick for testing varies greatly as well. Unfortunately, I was too young to know what kind of Lyme test confirmed I had it or how long I'd had Lyme before it was confirmed with the test. My mom has since passed away, so I can't ask her, and my father doesn't remember. But either way, with some kind of test, a conventional doctor confirmed I had Lyme disease. The next step in the conventional system is always antibiotics, which I took for, I believe, several months, which was somewhat standard back then. After we finished the antibiotics, my brother and I both still had chronic Lyme symptoms. At that point, there was no real alternative being offered by the conventional doctors besides more antibiotics. My mom decided this wasn't a suitable solution because, as she explained it to me, antibiotics wipe out your immune system, and staying on them for long periods of time means your immune system is likely never going to be strong enough again to overcome the chronic Lyme symptoms and put the Lyme disease into remission. Now we know that the Lyme bacteria is actually a spirochete, which is a spiral-shaped bacteria. And it's super tricky and brilliant and morphs to evade many of the common antibiotics for Lyme. Hence why people often initially feel better while taking antibiotics and then feel worse. So my mother declined antibiotics as a chronic Lyme treatment for me, and we then began a journey through the world of Lyme disease natural treatments to get me and my brother better. We began by trying several natural remedies, some of which were pretty wacky and out there, and some of which were more evidence-based and standard. But all of them required time and money, which highlights one of the unfortunate realities of healing chronic Lyme symptoms or any chronic health issue, really. Those without time or money to dedicate to taking care of themselves have a much harder time healing. We did so many things in those years that I was sick. I can remember visiting a Chinese herbalist in Flushing, a neighborhood in Queens, New York, and having to drink some disgustingly bitter herbal teas, which had antibacterial as well as immune-boosting properties daily. It stunk up our whole house and, as you can imagine, put a serious damper on my popularity for playdates. I believe I did this tea-based herbal therapy for Lyme for at least several months, if not a year. Since then, I have learned a lot about the incredible healing power of herbs for chronic Lyme symptoms from my interview with Lyme expert Dr. Bill Rawls, as well as from the Johns Hopkins Lyme and Tick-Borne Disease Research and Education Institute in the School of Public Health, who published a great research piece on the effectiveness for herbs against the Lyme bacteria and against co-infections often found in the tick bite. In another attempt to get rid of my chronic Lyme symptoms, I took supplements with breakfast and dinner and avoided, with some exceptions, I was a kid after all, dairy, processed food, and gluten, although back then we just called it wheat. About a year after my Lyme diagnosis, I wasn't getting fully better, and my mother took me to a tiny town in Minnesota called Mankato to see a dairy farmer who helped us do a treatment called hyperimmune bovine colostrum therapy, also known by its acronym HBCT. Colostrum is the milk produced during the first few days of a lactating mother after giving birth. Humans and cows alike produce it, as do other mammals. Hyperimmune colostrum is produced by cows that have received vaccinations against specific disease-causing organisms, in my case, Lyme. The Lyme vaccination then causes the cows to develop antibodies to fight Lyme, which then pass into the colostrum, which I then drank. HBCT was, I believe, an orphan drug phase at the time. This was around 1996, 1997, which means the FDA believes it can be effective, but needs a drug company to pay for the clinical trials and sponsor the treatment to come to market. So it was technically illegal for us to be using this therapy when we did. And certainly the dairy farmer who helped us do it was not practicing with a license. He was just a farmer. So the whole thing was very sort of hush-hush. But we were desperate, and my mother had heard that it could be quite effective. We'll be right back with my chronic Lyme recovery story after this quick message. I don't know about you, but I never listen to the end of a podcast anymore. So I'm hopping in here to let you know that the best way to stay empowered and on top of your health is to be in the WellBe community. So head to getwellbe.com/subscribe to make sure you're in like Flynn. On getwellbe.com, you'll learn about our online programs to help you go deeper and make life-altering changes to your health, and about our awesome non-toxic product database. If you're more of a social media person, let's be friends on Instagram. Find me at getwellbe. Okay, now back to my summer experience in Minnesota on a dairy farm trying an experimental treatment. All right, so setting the scene, my brother, mother, and I stayed in a Motel 6 for 3 weeks in the stifling heat of the Minnesota summer, going back and forth each day to a dairy farm swarming with flies. I had my blood taken several times by my mother in a car. I can still remember this vivid memory of that. And then I believe it was injected into the lactating cow, who then produced colostrum that we packed up several frozen gallons of to take back to New York. I walked around school in 7th grade with a little freezer bag for my colostrum and swished a few ounces under my tongue every few hours for months. Needless to say, my 12-year-old self thought this treatment was pretty insane. As a recent update, there was a published Phase 1 clinical trial in June 2022 using HBCT for the COVID-19 virus. The trial was deemed successful, with the study authors noting, in conclusion, the generation of IgG and neutralizing antibodies was successful in the bovine colostrum, which is safe for consumption. Basically saying this is safe for humans to consume, and that the colostrum that the cow made had long-term and neutralizing antibodies against COVID. So it certainly worked in that trial against the COVID virus, and I believe is probably just as effective against the Lyme bacteria, though I haven't been able to find a clinical trial as specific for Lyme. All right, now back to my story. The very last summer that I was acutely sick with Lyme, I was taken to a hyperbaric oxygen facility in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is Amish country, for another 3-week stay. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, also known by its acronym, HBOT, uses highly pressurized air, which is 3 times that of normal air pressure, to hyperoxygenate your blood via your lungs. The oxygen travels through your body and, according to the Mayo Clinic, helps fight bacteria and stimulate the release of substances called growth factors and stem cells, which promote healing. I can remember lying in this tanning bed-looking machine every day for a few hours and just breathing deeply. Finally, my health began to turn around by the time I was about 13 or 14. My younger brother took longer to recover, however, because I believe his Lyme had been untreated for longer than mine, and his symptoms seemed more severe than mine. He was taken out of his highly competitive elementary school at age 9 and went through less rigorous schooling and was then homeschooled for the rest of his childhood. His joint pain subsided sometime in his mid to late teens, and his brain recovered enough for him to attend and graduate from a top-tier university, though his gut microbiome has never quite been the same. Unfortunately, there isn't one natural Lyme treatment for everyone to kill off chronic Lyme symptoms because it depends on a lot of factors. First, the makeup of your gut bacteria and the strength of your immune system. Second, whether you're battling any other viruses or parasites or a different bacteria at the same time. Third, how long you've had Lyme untreated. Fourth, whether you also got co-infections in the tick bite, and many other factors. I offer my story and the natural remedies that I use to get better through my mother's research and actions, of course. She was really in charge of my care at the time, as a place to start exploring if you're looking for ways to treat Lyme disease, but they may not work for everyone. I recognize now that many of the treatments my mom researched and tried for us were experimental, but she had such determination to get us better that eventually one or a combination of several of them worked to put the chronic Lyme symptoms into remission and restore our immune system's ability to keep Lyme from rearing its ugly head. Of course, we'll never be able to know which were really effective and which weren't, since many of them were used in conjunction with one another. I will be forever grateful for my mom's ability to think outside the box and for her ferocious determination to research all the options, from the conventional to the very woo-woo. She did all this, by the way, in a pre-Google era. Remember Alta Vista? I think that's probably what she was using, as well as word of mouth through a lot of different kinds of practitioners she became friends with. This time was a time when information about natural remedies for Lyme disease and about Lyme disease in general was not readily available. My mom taught me these 3 very important lessons, and since May is also the month of Mother's Day and her birthday, I'm thinking a lot about her, so I'll share them with you. The first is knowledge is power. The more you know and the more you understand, the more powerful you are. Number 2, where there is a will, there is a way. She really was so determined, and she never gave up. And number 3, the world of integrative medicine and holistic healthcare, which I previously thought of as pretty woo-woo and full of quacks and hippies, was really full of, mostly, I can't speak for all, practitioners and doctors who were willing to think, learn, and treat differently from conventional healthcare providers, sometimes at tremendous risk to their reputation, as I saw with that very brave dairy farmer. From these practitioners, I learned the power of courage, conviction, and standing up for truth and medical freedom, no matter what the cost. Lyme disease can be truly heartbreaking and debilitating. I feel incredibly lucky to be on the other side of it, and I'll continue to bring attention and advocacy to all of those lying in bed right now who have been exhausted and bedridden, perhaps for years or even decades, with antibiotic IV drips coming out of their arms and with seemingly no end in sight and no light at the end of the tunnel. For anyone listening to this in that state, know this: there is light, you can heal, you just have to think a bit outside of the box and fight for your right to heal in whatever way is needed, not in whatever way is accepted by the medical establishment, our society, or even insurance companies. Lastly, it's important to remember that you have to do the work, even though you feel awful and have zero energy and motivation. You have to follow the strict diets, take the supplements, take the herbs, get in the tank, swish around the colostrum or whatever natural treatment for Lyme you can access, and ultimately whatever ends up working for you. Keep trying different things until something begins to work, but also remember that you have to be patient. No natural treatment starts to work without doing it for at least a few months. Healing from Lyme is a day-at-a-time process, and it will likely take months, if not years, to fully put chronic Lyme symptoms into remission. But it can happen, so have faith and be determined. So that's all for today. To read the written version of this episode with plenty of research links, head to getwellbe.com or check out the link to the article in the show notes. And while you're on getwellbe.com, definitely become a Wellbe Insider to get our latest content weekly in your inbox. And if you haven't already and found this episode helpful or interesting, subscribe to the podcast. This way you'll never miss a new episode and they'll be delivered to you whenever we publish a new one. And please share this episode with family or friends who you think might find it valuable and informative. It means a lot and helps more people find the podcast. And if you love the Wellbe podcast, please leave a quick review right now. It does so much for helping the show show up in search results. And if you already have, then thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This is your host, Adrienne Nolan-Smith, and thanks again for listening to the Get Wellbe podcast.